I was born into early childhood education because my mum is a Montessori practitioner. So she actually opened her first Montessori preschool for me to attend when I was a 2-year-old. So I grew up totally immersed in this world and having the absolute privilege of absorbing things all through my childhood and my adolescence that kind of gave me a little bit of a head start by the time I was old enough to really study formally. A lot of the things that I was reading about felt like second nature to me because of the way that Mum raised me and the way that I'd seen her operate professionally as well. So I then initially studied Montessori education specifically. And was working in a Montessori classroom. I then did my Bachelor of Early Childhood part-time while I was working full-time, and at that stage was also a centre director because I really love what I do. And so I just always wanted to do more and more of it. Continuing on to my Diploma of Positive Psychology, because I was very aware that what we do in early childhood education really is a form of preventative psychology. We're trying to work with little human beings who are still forming their psychological landscape, and we're trying to help them build the tools that they're going to use throughout their whole life, the resilience, the coping strategies. We know we cannot inoculate them against challenge, so we're trying to equip them with what they need to manage it when it happens. And because I could see that really kind of natural parallel, I wanted to look into that formally. And what I really enjoyed with the Diploma of Positive Psychology was then also having a much deeper understanding of the importance of educator well-being and a family well-being, and having a much greater sense of, I guess, our responsibility, not just as early childhood practitioners, but in my role now as a centre owner, our responsibility to protect our educators and to understand that they are in a caregiving profession where they give so much of themselves, and we need to make sure that we're helping to refill their cup too. So, as is so often the case these days, scrolling through Facebook it was either great boosted marketing or serendipity, depending on how romantic you want to be about it. I'm going to say the latter feed, and it sort of popped up. And I think the tagline was something along the lines of, do you want to get back to doing what you love? And sort of hitting on that note of how the pressures and expectations of documentation can sometimes put us in front of a screen in an office instead of face-to-face with children in the classroom. And that's a theme that comes back time and time again from our educators, that they want to be present with the children, but they're feeling this pressure of, I should be documenting, I should be writing up, I should be elaborating. So that was sort of what stood out to me was, okay, I have no context beyond this, this tagline, and let's have a look at what this is. So with my mum and I, my mum's my business partner, so Mum and I then did a little trial where we actually used my own son as the example. We just, started speaking about something we'd been doing with him that day. And it was this immediate, almost revelation of, not only is this doing an amazing job of instantly elaborating on what we're specifying, so it's not inventing something, it's not generic, it's building on what we're giving it, but it was also offering really genuinely insightful ideas for what to do next. So there was just this immediate excitement of, okay, wow, this is really interesting. And we just wanted to, I guess, learn more from that point. I think probably the biggest challenge is time. There's not enough hours in the day to do all the things that our educators want to do, because they want to be present for the children, they want to be engaged with families, they want to be preparing the environment, coming up with these inspiring activities, and they need to be writing this sort of paper trail of all those other elements. And so the time pressure on them is really significant. And, we're particularly aware that for the vast majority of our educators, they got into this field because they love working with children, not because they are prolific authors. They may have written incidentally as part of their studies. It may or may not be a strength that they have in their repertoire, but very few of our educators absolutely love writing things down. They love working with children.
Yeah,
and that's where they want to spend the majority of their time and the majority of their energy. And so it's about looking for a solution to make the documentation part, which is vital and important, but maybe not the most satisfying for them, maybe not the most emotionally fulfilling for them. How can we make that part of the job more efficient and done to the same quality, and giving parents the same insights and giving children the same ideas for how to analyse what they're doing and move forward, but giving the educators some time back so that they can spend their moments with the children? quite often almost a stage fright when it comes to documenting that, you know, you've loved what you've done in the classroom, then you go into the staff room and you know that you need to write something up and you almost freeze. You know, where do I begin? How do I phrase this? And you're sort of thinking, you know, you've got your own voice as an individual, but then you're trying to build a professional dialogue around that. And I think for a lot of people, it makes it a process that feels disempowering because they don't quite know where to begin. They don't know quite how to get where they want to go. Particularly true for a lot of our educators with English as a second language. We're so privileged to have a culturally diverse team. That's so beneficial and enriching for our children. It means that our equally diverse families can have people who can communicate with them in their home languages. But when it comes to sitting down and writing up, you know, a learning story or, you know, documenting a group program, it can be really labourful for someone with English as a second language to have to figure out not only how to translate this into written English, but also in a professional context, you know, using the right vocabulary, bringing in those early years learning framework references. That's a really difficult task and it takes a lot of mental energy.
Absolutely.
To make that not just quicker, but lighter process where they get to feel the pride of celebrating their professional work and illuminating what the child has done. I would be lying if I didn't say yes, because there was this moment where I looked at it and I thought, this is interesting, but a little part of me went, oh, robots in the classroom, you know. I think as much as documentation can be experienced as a pressure for educators, it is also a privilege. And it is part of our professional role that we take great pride in, to be able to express what we know about the children and to celebrate that. So yeah, there was this little reservation of, will this be detracting from that? Will this make it generic? Will this make it feel like it's not really my voice or my efforts? You know, am I cheating somehow if I'm giving a piece of documentation I haven't put all of my efforts into? If I've had help with that, is that the wrong thing to do? And we engaged in some really beautiful critical reflection with one of our teams around those feelings and why we felt that way. Was that a knee-jerk reaction or was it based on something more substantial? And one of our educators put something forward that I found really transformative, and I really thank her for it. She said that when she sits down and writes her documentation, she has her own words and what's coming up off the top of her head, but she also reads examples of old learning stories and reports to get ideas from her colleagues. She also goes online and looks up examples of things that are on the internet. She also opens her Montessori manuals and reads descriptions of the lessons. She reads the early years learning framework and looks at the phrasing that they use in there. And then she takes all these different sources and she integrates them into what she ends up writing. And she said, well, what's the difference between me spending an hour and a half doing that or me having help from a program that is designed to synthesize those different sources while still responding to my input and my voice and my ideas?
Yeah.
And that was a really beautiful way of looking at it. This process, in our own way, it's just helping to speed that up and it's helping to automate that a little bit. I also think that it really helped, as I said, my first experience of it was regarding my son. You know, before I did anything to do with preschool, I was putting in some observations about my own child, and you just can't get more emotionally connected than that. Still felt, even though I knew that the AI had helped to write this observation, I still felt like it was a very genuine reflection of my son and that it was giving me insights that are helpful to me as a parent to understand him better, to make me think of things I might not have otherwise considered, and to give me ideas that I might not have come across because I've got my own personal biases and I've got my sort of perspective. So giving me a broader way of looking at things, it actually did give me a really good insight as a parent. And so I thought, well, if I'm reading this knowing that technology has assisted in creating this output, but knowing that it was still, you know, our voices going into it and my son coming out of it, that was really reassuring for me. Yeah. I think the biggest thing for us is that we don't ever introduce anything top down. So we didn't say, guess what, everybody, you're doing this now. what we did was we presented, this was our journey of how we came across this concept. Here's been our experiences. We particularly talked to our teams about the conversations we'd had with Hamal and how incredibly exciting, I guess is the best word, we had found that, because we were talking to a practitioner, we were talking to somebody who understood the behind the scenes of early childhood and was coming at it from the perspective of wanting to create something that is still very child-centered, but also really respecting the educator perspective as well. So we shared what the journey that we'd been on, and then we said, now we want to take you on this journey. How do you feel about it? We're not going to force this upon anyone, but what are your thoughts? What do you think are the advantages, the disadvantages? We critically reflected, and that's our bread and butter in early childhood, isn't it? We engage in critical reflection. So that's what we did as a team. And we found, some diverse initial reactions. So some people were like, yes, let's do it. A couple of people going, oh yeah, I've heard about this from some friends who have kind of recommended it to me. And a couple who went, oh, no, this just doesn't feel right. And so again, it was respecting each of those reactions, that nobody is right or wrong. We also really emphasized that what's really important to remember with LoveHeart is it's not that you have to use it all the time for every observation. You don't have to use it at all if you don't feel that it's necessary to your practice. It's a tool there when you need it, but it's not something that you have to be using absolutely all of the time. So it was important to us to allow for that individualization and for educators to feel empowered to use it when, how, and if they need it. It's been really key for us to talk to our teams about the fact that, again, it is not taking over what they're doing and it's not taking out of their hands. It's assisting them to achieve something that is an integral part of their role. So I think that that perspective has really helped too, that we're not suggesting that they just outsource to a robot. Things that has been really quick feedback is that they're really excited that it has Montessori integrated into it. The fact that you can choose your philosophy and kind of have something that then is really personalized to your particular pedagogy. That was something that I think was very greatly appreciated, particularly because, in our centres where we've got at Jessica, for instance, we're really lucky. All of our educators are Montessori qualified in addition to having other early childhood qualifications. Amazing. Here at Edinburgh, which is a newer centre with therefore a newer team, it's about 50-50 in terms of who has their Montessori qualification compared to those who are still on their way towards that. And so for those who are still learning, having a program that's again supporting them not just with the EYLF vocabulary, but also now with this Montessori terminology and kind of acting as a bit of an index and a thesaurus for them, it's incredibly valuable to them because it's not just helping them articulate, it's helping them to learn. Because they're feeding in their observations with their own language and getting back these suggestions for how that relates specifically to the Montessori approach. So their professional knowledge is increasing along with writing that observation. I would say make an informed decision. We talk with children about learning through play, don't we? That, you learn through hands-on experience. And so I would suggest taking the same approach with this. Play with it, have experience with it, and then see how it feels. For us, getting hands-on with it felt empowering, and it felt like it was going to lift a weight and elevate our practice. I'm not saying everybody has to feel that way, but I think a lot of them will. Just have a play and see how you feel.